And we know that this symphony must be a homage to the past of some sort, since the third movement is titled Tempo di Menuetto. But unlike those lightning-quick minuets of symphonies number 1 and 4, this one is to be played at the speed of an 18th century minuet. It could actually be danced to. But there are several other issues to deal with. First, its meter, the standard 3 beats to the measure for a minuet. This is complicated by its construction. I'll show you how. If you begin by counting 3 beats to the bar, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, you'll notice something odd. So here it is. Listen to it and count along. 1, 2, 3. There's one too many beats before the actual melody begins, which is this. What Beethoven has done here is to immediately disrupt the phrase structure by adding an extra beat of as an upbeat. Anyway, this brief but disorienting passage is actually a short introduction. The main minuet is now underway, and the main theme contains 3 little motives that are important. First, the upbeat to the actual main theme, the main tune. Later, you'll hear it proclaimed by trumpets and horns and timpani. Second, there's that descending figure, the triad. That. And third, what I'll call the short upbeat. It's clipped and martial. And underneath the main theme, the opening figure now continues as the accompaniment. And this accompaniment is really at odds with what we'd expect from a classic minuet, something more like this. Something clean and elegant in the accompaniment. But Beethoven's minuet is heavy. It has power. It surges ahead, much like the swing and the thrust of the first movement. So there's the first section of the minuet, which, as always, is repeated. The second main section immediately moves into C major, the dominant key, and the descending triad figure now takes over. First violins, second violins, violas and celli, basses, while the opening motive continues to provide the surging accompaniment. And the descending triad now is used to move us back into F major, like so. And now an F7th chord to move us into B flat major. That's the descending triad figure. 1, 2, and 3. But then Beethoven shortens the length of the first note so that we now have a 2-beat figure. The perfect opportunity to use what else? The hemiola device. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Well, that's cute. By this time, the meter is so mixed up that we're all waiting for the bassoon to enter with the main tune and get us back on track. Heard Beethoven use that short, clipped upbeat motive, ba-ba-dum, to move us through several keys. Then a delicate and a big cadence in F major. all using that short, clipped upbeat. Ba-ba-dum. And now it's time for an old-world royal fanfare with trumpets, horns, and timpani to finish things in grand style, using the longer upbeat figure with the descending triad, answered by the short upbeat. The woodwinds then enter with the fanfare, but a beat early. There are more hemiola figures, there's back and forth between the winds and strings, there's weird phrase lengths. If this is sounding complicated, it is. It's 1812, and Beethoven is turning the old-fashioned minuet on its head. Rhythmic and melodic structure, harmonies, the billowing romantic textures. Everywhere you turn, there's something that is historically, traditionally wrong. Academically, it's very wrong. But who cares? He's Beethoven, and the destiny of music is in his hands. And now the trio of the minuet. And this might be as close as Beethoven comes to actually recalling the elegance of the 18th century minuet. The trio begins with a three-note upbeat figure, like so, and Beethoven will use it as a little motive, as you'll see. And it's tranquil, it's a pastoral duet for two French horns, and based on the familiar rustic sound of the horn fifth. You will notice the gentle accompaniment of the cello outlining the harmony with triads. But they play in a triplet rhythm, 1, 2, 3, and 1, which interlocks with the duple rhythm of the horns. The same device, triplet rhythm in the accompaniment, duple rhythm in the melody, would become a staple of the music of Brahms 50 years later. Well, the horns are now answered by another favorite pastoral instrument of Beethoven's, the clarinet. Again, very rustic, straight out of the world of the pastoral symphony. But now the real magic will happen in the trio's second section. This is my favorite passage of the entire symphony. We've moved into C major, the dominant key, and the strings now play the melody, beginning with the three-note upbeat. We'll call it the motive, okay? And the strings are answered by the horns and clarinet, which definitely evokes a rustic shepherd's call dialogue within the orchestra. And you heard C major answered by C minor. And then C minor moves gently into A flat major. And the impassioned, intense beauty of this passage is carried by the strings into this chord. On the subdominant, of course, there's harmony, always adding great beauty. The clarinet is playing the motive now above this beautiful passage, like so. And now the horn, super expressive, arriving here. And my playing cannot begin to do justice to this. And we back into F major, and the clarinet re-emerges, and it takes up the gorgeous string phrase. But the clarinet now in F major, with the two French horns underneath, except that Beethoven now embellishes this melody to allow the clarinet its own free-flowing cantilena. And this highest note, F, was certainly the highest note on the instrument at that point in Beethoven's day, with the clarinet in its infancy. So to assign this treacherously high note at the apex of this lovely, ecstatic clarinet solo was a very bold thing to do. And the trio section now closes with an open-air dialogue between clarinet and horns, and despite its tranquility, the cello and bass accompaniment, with triple and duplet rhythms combined, produces a somewhat ponderous and heavy-footed effect. And Beethoven will end this elegant old world trio with the clarinet on that same perilously high note. So much detail here in a passage that few listeners ever seem to notice, other than the can the horns and clarinet make it through without any flubs, when in fact this trio is one of the most exquisite passages in all 9 symphonies. And the main minuet is played again from the beginning, minus its repeats. And you never really quite know how to take this minuet. Beethoven's sense of humor, his homage to the past here, is a rare and multi-dimensional thing. The continually shifting, unpredictable rhythms, the surging, brawny, full-bodied texture, the stately, pompous fanfares from trumpets and timpani, the rustic charm and soaring lyricism of the trio, all these things combine to produce yet another astounding example of Beethoven's profound creativity, which will continue to thrill and amaze in the finale. And yes, I suppose I have an axe to grind with this symphony, which, while not quite as overlooked and ignored as number 4, still manages to be passed over in favor of the big ones, numbers 3, 5, 7, and 9. And looking back, it's very odd. I realized that from the very beginning, I always was drawn to the even-numbered symphonies. I already knew the pastoral number 6 from Disney's Fantasia, but when I started to learn the rest sort of as a group, it was the 2nd, 4th, and 8th that I naturally felt the closest attachment to. That's probably why I'm going into such detail with these symphonies here. They deserve to stand right alongside the others. Besides, Beethoven himself thought very highly of his 8th symphony. I often refer to the pastoral elements in Beethoven's symphonies, and as we've seen in the Symphony No. 6, the love of nature was a major part of the Romantic movement, and this pastoral nature element is very strong in the finale of Beethoven's 8th. For instance, his main theme, it's light and fleeting and delicate, it prominently features this motif, which is basically the rustic horn fifth figure, embellished. And it resolves like so. And even though this pattern probably suggested a rural shepherd's call to listeners of the day, this finale is actually as raucous and thrilling as anything Beethoven ever wrote, requiring the utmost in orchestral technique and brilliance of playing. So there's your tranquil, serene nature, comfort music. Again, another tradition of the day blown sky high by Beethoven's explosive power. But let's look at this opening, this magical fluttery sound, which doesn't really translate that well to the piano, but it precedes each of the little figures. Listen to it. Beethoven is again creating brilliant new sounds in the orchestra, building his main theme on what sounds like an effect in the violins. By far the most familiar effect in string playing is the tremolo, tremulous in its sound. Tremolo would become a part of every future composer's orchestral language. Sometimes it's mysterious, sometimes dramatic, sometimes peaceful, shimmery, and pastoral. That was music of Berlioz, Mahler, and Debussy in that order. And the tremolo effect is made by the string players moving their bow as rapidly as possible back and forth on the strings of their instrument. But having gone through all of this now, Beethoven did not write tremolos here, but he might as well have. He actually writes a series of 6 repeated notes. You have the first violins on A, and the second violins a third below them on F. And he writes a very rapid triplet figure, 2 groups of 3 notes, like so. I play very slow. But at the lightning-quick tempo, the speed which Beethoven indicates, this figure sounds very much like a tremolo, and it propels the music in a dynamic but breathlessly exciting way. Yes, it might as well be a tremolo at that speed. And that sprightly descending motive will become very important later on. And as you heard, the main theme in the tonic key of F major and its leaping cadence in the violins moved to the dominant C major, and so did the theme, as in any good sonata movement. But this move to C major is very brief, as this delicate music is abruptly, audaciously interrupted, and F major is back with a full orchestral repeat of the main theme. So there's our first theme group, the fleeting, delicate pastoral, the sprightly descending, the cosmic blast, then the fortissimo repeat of the main theme, but now a new section based on a rugged triad figure. And this triad figure, usually descending, sometimes ascending, leads directly now to the lyrical secondary theme in A flat major. It's very graceful with that little curly cue in the melody. And this flows directly now into the closing theme built on this progression, which I'll play slowly. There's almost an air of fantasy about this closing theme. It's light and airy, and a gentle triplet outline below in the violins. Here now is this closing theme and where it leads. So that triad figure in the bass leads us through these harmonies back to F major, and all of it, as you hear, being driven by the furious triplets in the strings. Then an abrupt cutoff and the flickering triplets softly in the violas, and then the violins an octave higher. And now a restatement of the main theme, as in the beginning. But let's stop for a moment, because the architecture of this finale is fascinating and very unusual. Beethoven, again, clearly having the time of his life with this music, but at the same time, the level of technical invention is at an all-time high. We've just ended the first major section, and it's constructed like your typical exposition, a main theme in F major, interrupted by that massive... The main theme repeats. Now it goes into the section combined with that triad figure. Then the lyrical secondary theme. And the whirling, swirling, magical closing theme. So we have the basic outline now of a sonata exposition with three basic themes. Now we enter what is clearly a development section. So let's see where all of this goes. You heard in our last excerpt, as it ended, that the development section now begins with the return of the main theme, but it soon veers off in a rather dramatic way into new harmonic regions. And it's that sprightly descending motive that Beethoven now will concentrate on. And now an inversion appears, an ascending version of it. And Beethoven masterfully plays them off of one another, often the ascending version and the descending version at the same time. Very light and playful, but suddenly vigorous and dramatic. And there was that brief moment when all of the voices lined up. Very passionate. Now, Beethoven, with brilliance to spare, increases the tension by extracting just the third and fourth notes of this motive. Just these two notes. And he begins to energize things by repeating this tiny two-note motive. Ending up on a big unison of two pitches. Stuck on these two pitches, which happen to be the same two pitches that powered through the finale of the Seventh Symphony. In A major, and here we are grinding away on these same two pitches in the finale of the Eighth, which also will lead us to A major and a joyous return of the main theme. And underneath this joyous outburst, the low strings are pounding away at the E in octaves, which might be related to those crazy octaves in the first movement. You never know. But now, this is echoed by the flute and the strings very lightly, followed by what can only be described as hilarious, musically speaking, as this, on E, the note E, slips up a half step to F, but played by a bassoon and the timpani. And this leads to a full restatement of the opening sonata exposition. All three themes, including our lyrical second theme, now in D-flat major, it all returns exactly as in the exposition. Two things, though. One micro and the other macro. The micro, this timpani thing, such nonsense was unheard of in 1813. You remember my discussion of the timpani tuning in the scherzo of the 7th Symphony, how every composer used the two kettle drums to play the tonic note and the dominant note of any given work. Well, Beethoven really challenges himself here. In the 7th, he used one timpano tuned to F, the tonic note of the scherzo, right? The other drum, you recall, he kept tuned to A, since the music kept modulating into A major. So he was able to add the power of the timpani to both of those keys. But in the finale of the 8th, Beethoven does the unthinkable. He tunes both drums to the note F, the tonic key, one high, the other low, greatly limiting the number of passages where the timpani would fit into the harmonies of this finale. But hey, he'll live with it, because when that little octave passage on E grabs our attention, coming out of the dramatic, joyous A major, and then those octaves on E, what more striking, bizarre way to get us back into F major than our country bumpkin duo of bassoon and timpani also playing octaves on F? And the man was almost completely deaf and basically cut off from the normal world and headed for a serious emotional depression when he finished this music. But the joy of artistic creation was bubbling over. Now, the macro observation I mentioned, the architecture, the design of this finale, it is very unusual. We had the exposition with its three basic themes, followed by the dramatic development section, which was built on, and its inversion, then that goofy timpani bassoon thing that led us back to the full restatement of the opening exposition with all three themes. So this sounds like a standard sonata form: exposition, development, and recapitulation. So a coda to end the symphony should be next. But it doesn't happen, since we are now only at the halfway point of this movement. Beethoven is using a hybrid form for this finale that's a sonata form merged with some sort of rondo, where the main theme, which is our A material, keeps returning, and even though this finale feels like a rondo with the many happy returns of the material in between each of these repeats is not new material, as in the rondo. It's the same material used in fascinating new ways. So it's rondo in construction, but not in its use of the materials. So here's a quick review. A full exposition in the beginning with all three theme groups, followed by that passionate development section based on then the timpani thing, leading us back to the main theme and what seemed like a standard recapitulation. But now, instead of a coda to end it all, we have a second development section coming. And this one is really unusual, and it shows just how advanced Beethoven's thinking had become, even in this supposedly light-hearted work. So here's Beethoven just minding his own business, with this new section starting off just like every other section that we've heard. Even though we're now in the key of B flat, the subdominant key, but never mind that. Instead, listen to what happens with our cheery little rustic motive. Some pretty stern stuff. Then a pause. And now, the most amazing passage of this finale, a stunning example of true symphonic development. In the main theme, there's one melodic figure that I haven't yet mentioned. It is this. And it's part of that sprightly descending motive. Here it is. And you may recall that in the previous development section, this figure was quite forceful. So Beethoven now extracts this figure, and out of the silence that follows the cello and bass, we hear what sounds like a chant, calm and detached. It's a single voice drifting across the soundscape in the second violins. It's echoed by the woodwinds now, but with a new chorale-like bass added to it. And there's a mystical, serene quality to this. And you guessed it, this mystical chant melody is an augmented, a slowed-down version of this from the main theme. But the last three notes are now lowered in this new chant version. It's an amazing transformation, this new mystical chant. But equally remarkable is a tiny flickering sound that you hear above in the first violins and then low in the cello and bass. And that magical sound is the rapid triplet figure from the main theme that is continually present in this finale. And now, what began as a distant ethereal procession begins to grow through Beethoven's astounding imagination and technique into a powerful, impassioned march. And the upper and lower voices continually move in contrary motion. This magnificently constructed symphonic arc, which Beethoven has methodically developed step by step from a serene procession into a furious stampede of sound. We're now in D minor, but it's clear that brilliant D major is coming in this big buildup. And the main theme now returns triumphantly in D major. And I'm sure Beethoven would have loved to use the timpani here on A to add power to the orchestra at this big moment. But he can't do it. The timpani are both tuned to octave Fs. But it's worth the wait as the timpani now cap off this great climactic passage like so. Certainly a good way to diffuse the tension as we go bouncing along. We now have entered the final major section of the finale. As you heard, another restatement of the main theme in F major. So here's another quick review of this finale. There's the main exposition, followed by a development section. Then the main exposition returns, complete, giving the impression that it's a recapitulation. Then a second development section, that whole processional, mystical march thing that we've just come through. And now another return of the main material, like in a rondo. And knowing Beethoven, he will not phone it in and just give us another literal repeat of what we've heard before. No way. So fasten your seatbelts. The main theme now cadences, as usual, in C major. And we're hit again by that annoying D flat. Well, we've been blindsided a number of times by this obnoxious, which always leads us then back to F major. Okay, and the implied harmony then would be something like this. That's the way we've always been hearing it. But this time, Beethoven decides to go in an entirely new direction, clearly relishing the humor in this outrageous and daring passage. A massive D-flat, again, followed now by a fleeting D-flat major. Barely audible. Then another massive D-flat. D-flat minor. And it happens very, very quickly. And how about 3 more massive D-flats while we're at it? It's like, all right, I heard you the first time. There's lots of musical humor in this symphony, obviously. The second movement like a drawing room comedy. But this is more like a vaudeville pie in the face. But what if Beethoven, in this harmonic free-for-all we've entered, what if he took the tonic F major and kept the middle note, the A, intact, but raises the F and the C, raises them a half step. So it becomes this. Woo, F sharp minor. It's very close to F major on the keyboard, but it's wildly foreign to F major in its sound and its function. So those pounding D flats or C sharps, they now take us so far away from F major, they kind of prepare our ear for this. And the main theme, like so. Where did all this come from? It seemed like we were headed for another standard repeat of this material, but I told you that Beethoven was not just going to phone it in again. So let's back up now to those big C sharps. And here goes. Beethoven slipped in a very quick Neapolitan chord to keep us off of balance. Here it is. And again, he takes this figure, which we heard as that austere processional a while back. But as you heard now, the music is raging in F sharp minor, and this motive is extended like so. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. And he drives the music forward with... And all of this tempest in the orchestra is created with only the strings and the woodwinds. The technical limits of the horns, trumpets, and timpani, the heavy artillery, means that they are on the sidelines while we're in F sharp minor. But in a stunning flash of brilliance, they all enter as Beethoven suddenly reverts from F sharp minor back down a half step. Voila! And F major returns now with horns, trumpets, and timpani to the rescue. So let's hear this entire passage, and I will call it out. The main theme resolves, as always, in C major. Look out! D flat major, D flat minor. And 3 more that plunge us into F sharp minor. The main theme like we've never heard it. And the phrase repeats and drives ahead. And here it comes. F major. And that single measure continues to drive the music. The energy is unstoppable. And our lyrical second theme returns. And a new harmonic progression to add to the fun. With that new swinging cadence. Have we heard that before? No, it's a very common cadence. Now the lyrical second theme is in the cello and bass. But again, the calm is short-lived. Or is it short-lived? Say what? What? A very unique way to get back to F major now for our coda. It's the main theme now with rustic horns and bassoons, which can't play the rapid triplet figures like the strings, so Beethoven slows the triplets down by half. And since the basic interval of the third, that is 3 notes apart, these 2 notes, the third, since it's in a way the primal cell of this finale that animates everything with that triplet figure, Beethoven now, in the coda, distills, he concentrates the sound of the entire orchestra into this tiny 2-note cell, F and a third, and it shimmers in the strings like a wide-open vista of nature from the very highest down through the entire range of the orchestra to the lowest, the cello and bassoons, and then all the way back up again. And then it happens again, doubling the speed of the thirds. Those bouncing timpani return in the distance, and we hear the sprightly descending theme, almost like a final farewell, and our shepherd's call echoing in the strings. It's amazing, and it clearly evokes the serene, cheerful world of nature, the expression of feeling, as Beethoven mentioned in the 6th Symphony. But as it's fading away, the music then reverses and begins to crescendo into big F major, and Beethoven again relies on the fundamental power and logic of the tonic and dominant tonic harmonies to bring the music to a close, including a virtuosic, nearly unplayable passage for the 2 timpani, both tuned to F, high and low, and so technically beyond what any orchestral drummer of the day would be expected to play, unless, say, Buddy Rich's great-great-great-great-grandfather happened to be sitting in there in Vienna back then. At any rate, here is Beethoven's nature coda, beginning with the sound of echoing thirds throughout the orchestra, and continuing on to the end. And the thirds shimmering from highest to lowest, and ascending, and now again, twice as fast, and the timpani, and our sprightly tune, and the main motive in the distance. But now a crescendo, and the timpani. And more timpani. And all tonic, F major, right to the end. Beethoven's ingenious use of the timpani to play the octave Fs would carry over into his next and final symphony, where the boldness of this device and those same 2 notes would contribute mightily to the epic nature of that work's scherzo. But here, in the finale of the 8th, all is joyous, raucous, unstoppable energy. This is supposedly a lightweight work, a homage to the old world style of Haydn and all of that. But don't let anybody tell you it's a lesser work, even compared to the 5th and 7th. Like all of Beethoven's symphonies, the 8th is a landmark in music with its own unique language and fresh, bold approach, and completed during the fall of 1812, when Beethoven's life was about to crater into a troubling period of depression and creative malaise, which looked as if it might develop into a serious mental health crisis. But the tides of history now swept in to rescue Beethoven. Throughout 1813, Napoleon was in various stages of retreat from his disastrous Russian campaign, and he suffered 2 major military defeats, one in Spain at the hands of the British Duke of Wellington, and the other at Leipzig. So patriotic fervor in Vienna was soaring. Enter the impresario and inventor Johann Melzel, who loved creating and promoting and tinkering with mechanical contraptions, including his metronome, and who brought to Beethoven his sketches for a new popular musical potpourri of British and French patriotic tunes, which Beethoven filled out and orchestrated as his Wellington's Victory, premiered at a huge gala concert in December of 1813 with an all-star roster of musicians performing in the orchestra. Antonio Salieri was there, Ludwig Spohr, Giacomo Meyerbeer, Ignaz Moscheles, Johann Hummel, most of them sitting in as percussionists, drums, cymbals, and cannons, etc. Can you imagine old Salieri beating away on a cannon drum? It's all true. You cannot make this stuff up. This concert was a sensation, as was the premiere of Beethoven's own Seventh Symphony on the same program. So things were definitely on the upswing for him. A few months later, Beethoven secured funding to repeat the program, and he added the premiere of the Eighth Symphony to the concert. And then to continue to capitalize on the spirit of the times, Beethoven's 1805 opera Fidelio was revised and performed now to great acclaim, followed by the historic Congress of Vienna, an 8-month shindig ostensibly to draw up a peace treaty and lay out plans for European stability in the post-Napoleonic era, but which, according to author Maynard Solomon, was also an excuse for an endless succession of, quote, balls, banquets, gala performances, tournaments, hunts, theatricals, sleighing expeditions, ballets, operas, balloon ascents, and torchlight parades, unquote. I mention all of this because Beethoven was the big musical superstar of this 8-month extravaganza, the Congress of Vienna. His music was continually being played. So things had definitely turned around for him. But in November of 1815, Beethoven's brother Caspar Karl died, and thus began a lengthy, rancorous battle between Beethoven and his brother's widow for guardianship of their son Karl, Beethoven's nephew. Again, I mention this unpleasant business because it serves as a backstory that will lead us to Beethoven's final creative period. And again, it's astounding when we attempt to reconcile, on the one hand, the all-too-real conflicts and character flaws in Beethoven's personal life with the deepening and sublime vision of his art. So while we take a moment to ponder this, before moving on to Beethoven's final symphony, here he is in a lighter, more populist mood, definitely not among his most profound works. But it certainly pulled him out of his great emotional crisis of 1813. And considering Beethoven's increasing deafness and his occasional hints of suicide, this work, Wellington's Victory, might have actually saved his life.